Today we are joined on the phone by artist Gary Pullin. He has a new book out called Ghoulish, The Art of Gary Pullin. Gary, how's it going today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time out with me today.
Yeah, hey, not a problem.
Well, Gary, let's talk about the new book, Ghoulish, The Art of Gary Pullin. Can you tell the listeners a bit about the book? What are we in for?
Well, basically, Ghoulish is spans my career from sort of like my high school days before I became like a professional graphic designer and illustrator. And it sort of starts when I was a kid watching horror movies and reading magazines like Famous Monsters and Fangoria and Deep Red. And really getting into the sort of like monster movies back in the 80s and all those glorious 80s horror films in the VHS era days. And then it kind of goes into when I started working at Rue Morgue magazine, which is a horror magazine based out of Toronto, Canada. And I met them after I graduated college. I did have a job in Toronto at a major design, a commercial art firm. They were a big commercial art firm. And so I worked on packages like beer labels and candy and stuff that you'd see in the stores. And then anyway, I met Rue Morgue and started to work with them. And, I couldn't believe that there was a horror magazine in Toronto. And I had to work for them. So I just sort of showed them a business card and then, met the publisher, Rodrigo Godino. And before I knew it, I was, their art director. The magazine is still going strong. It's 20 years old. But I was there for about 12 years. And I was their art director. And then I started to work on the side, do some things on the side here and there, and then I sort of parlayed that into a freelance career. And I guess the book covers all my poster work that I've done with Mondo and companies like Gray Matter and Scuzzles and all these screen printing companies, and that's sort of like alternative movie poster art that's become very popular these days. And also some of my vinyl packaging artwork. I've done soundtrack designs for John Carpenter's Christine and Creepshow and all these horror movies, Friday the 13th. And, I'm just sort of like a horror fan that sort of is just sort of like a big kid working on all of these amazing projects.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like the seeds for Ghoulish Gary were planted pretty early on then.
Yeah, and it's really cool. There's a forward and introduction. Rob Jones, he's the art director for Mondo, and he won a Grammy for graphic design. He actually does Jack White's artwork, and he used to do artwork for the White Stripes as well. And he won a Grammy for that. So he does a forward for my book. And I've worked with him at Mondo, and he's just been an amazing person to work with. And Larry Fessenden wrote the introduction, and I mean, he's a character actor in movies. He was in Panic Room with Jodie Foster, and he also runs Glass Eye Pix, which is an independent film company, and they're making waves. I mean, they've got a strong voice in independent horror cinema, and they've made some fantastic movies, House of the Devil and, The Innkeepers and You're Next and all of these really great horror films. And he wrote my intro. So I really, he sort of kind of nailed that. Like, I guess what I want to say is like Fessenden sort of nailed it in the introduction when he said that I was sort of like this product of the 80s, listening to heavy metal and watching horror films and reading comics and reading horror magazines. And, he sort of said that there's only a few that can kind of grow up and give it back to the genre that they love. And I guess that's all I've been trying to do is just honor the things that I love with artwork.
Well, Gary, I first became aware of you for your work with Rue Morgue, as you mentioned. I imagine, with the quality of work you were doing, the fact that it was a monthly publication, you probably didn't have much time to be doing anything else around then.
No, it's true. I mean, the magazine kept me very busy. I also sort of, I volunteered my time to do like original artwork for the covers, and so I would spend evenings and weekends doing that stuff because I wanted to. I wanted it to be the best looking product, the best looking horror magazine on the shelf. And I wanted it to grab your throat, and I wanted you to buy that magazine, and I wanted people to collect it. And I wanted people to bag and board it like they would their old Famous Monsters or their Fangorias and collect this thing, and I wanted the artwork to stand out as much as the writing did because, the magazine's known for its excellent writing. So, yeah, it didn't leave me a lot of time to do these side projects, but, I had to I mean, you can't tell a painter not to paint, I had to take on other things. I was interested in other things. And, just over time, it just sort of like one overlapped the other. I mean, I started to see a potential in running my own, being my own boss and running my own company. And before I knew it, I mean, I was busy and I was able to sort of transition into, I guess, what I do now, which is mainly pop culture art, mostly for the horror science fiction genre. And, I love it. I absolutely love it. I feel like, I should say too that I write for Rue Morgue now. I have a column in the magazine, which is great. I can do that. I still like being involved, but yeah, things have just really kind of taken off recently.
Awesome. Again, we're on the phone today with artist Gary Pullin. We're talking about his new book, Ghoulish, The Art of Gary Pullin. And, you got a lot of your movie posters featured in the book. And, I think we're roughly the same age. I grew up in the 80s as well. And, I always loved the artwork, on the posters and the VHS covers. Don't really do that nowadays. But, back then, a lot of times artwork turned out to be better than the films themselves, I think.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a lot of movies like Chopping Mall that never happens in the movie. I mean, that's a great poster. That never happens in the movie, but but that's what you're doing. I mean, like you're coming up with imagery to capture an audience, and you're trying to bring people into the movie with like a striking image, and that's really the essential ingredient right there, is just to do that. Like if you can come up with a compelling image, it's going to really draw you in. So, yeah, I feel like all those VHS covers, I think what we're doing now is sort of like we're trying to get back to that stuff. Like, in the 90s, Photoshop sort of took over, and if you use Photoshop correctly, I mean, or as a tool, that's great. But all of these sort of like floating head syndrome posters came out in the 90s, and, fans weren't really responding to that, especially horror genre fans. They don't respond too well to a terrible movie poster. And there's no reason to have bad artwork for your film. I feel like it's like, why would you buy like an expensive car and build an expensive car and then put a shitty paint job on it? I mean, I don't really, I don't know, but I feel like what we're doing now is like a response to that sort of, bad artwork in the 90s. Guys like myself, artists like myself that are doing new Blu-ray covers, and I work with Arrow Video as well. I mean, they're out in the UK and in the States now, and they put out a great product. I mean, I've always called them sort of like the Criterion of the UK, and they were one of the first companies to actually introduce alternative movie art on their releases. They started to hire illustrators to reinterpret Evil Dead and like, some of those old horror movies that they released back then. And it's going strong. I mean, a lot of companies have picked up on that. And I feel like, it's good. It's a good thing. People want to see their favorite movies interpreted in different ways. And in the end, it's just merchandise. But some of these collectible posters, like these screen prints, especially Mondo, the Mondo work that I've done, is highly collectible, and they only make like 275 copies of Scream, yeah. and that's all there is available. And so I feel that it's pleasing horror. It's pleasing horror fans with this new artwork, a lot of them anyway, and it's something that they can collect, because you can't get those one sheets anymore from the lobbies, right? I mean, I used to in the 80s, like, there was a video store that would throw out one sheets and like their VHS displays in the garbage, and I would go raid that garbage bin and keep posters. And I remember like keeping like a lot of those Charles Band posters, and I remember finding a Nightmare on Elm Street 3 poster, and it was just like the glory days, and I think essentially what I'm trying to do is capture those feelings with the artwork.
Yeah, it's great that it's starting to come back, after the changes it went through there in the 90s. And, I probably sound like a back in my day kind of guy, but, For guys like you and me, a lot of the kids nowadays probably don't understand the concept of, driving to the video store and then looking around for an hour or two. And basically you pick movies based on, what the cover looked like. A lot of times you didn't even know what you were in for.
That's right. We didn't have access to trailers as quickly as we do now. We can watch trailers at any time. Obviously the internet has helped us, get any amount of information you can on a film. But, growing up in the 80s and the 70s and the 80s, it was just all you had was like that blown out classified ad in the back of your newspaper at the drive-in. Like that's what was playing there, and all you had was that image, or all you had was maybe a commercial on TV that you saw, or if you were really into it, you would buy magazines, and Fangoria and Deep Red were my Bibles back in the 80s. And, I sort of just that's how I learned about all the European stuff like Argento, Suspiria and films like that. Now they're remaking Suspiria in North America. They're going to remake that movie. It's going to be a big deal. And, it's interesting that these cult films are still going strong. There's obviously something to the horror genre. Get Out's winning, Get Out and Shape of Water. They're winning Oscars, and I don't think it's a genre that's going to go away. So, I'm perfectly fine creating artwork for it.
Well, you mentioned doing some of the stuff early on, kind of in your spare time, but I'm kind of interested how these projects come about, I guess. Do the studios, commission work from you, or do you need to secure some sort of rights or something to recreate some of these?
Yeah. So that's exactly how I'll get an email from Universal, say, or I'll get an email from a company that has the rights or that is talking to Universal, and they've hired me as the artist. And then, they have to approve it. A lot of the times talent has to prove it too. As an example, I had a poster, my screen poster for Mondo was sort of inspired by Roy Lichtenstein. And Drew Barrymore is the focus of the poster, so she had to approve her likeness on it. And she did quickly, which was nice. And, a lot of the times you don't have likeness rights, so you have to come up with clever ways of not showing Jimmy Stewart on a Rear Window poster. You have to come up with other ways of interpreting the movie without showing, Tom Cruise or whoever it is. So, but that just makes it that much more of a challenge, and it opens up to, more creativity, to me. So, yeah.
And I'm assuming the people in these positions, at the studios, must be those horror fans, listening to heavy metal in the 80s, because, obviously there's no need really to commission a new cover for a Teen Wolf or, House 2, The Next Story or something like that. It must just be fans that want to see how it works.
Yeah, well, it is. And I think these movies, they have a fan base strong enough to support like companies and they have there's a strong fan base to support artists like me that create official artwork for these movies. Yeah, people still want to see, they can't get the old versions of them, or they're very expensive. A lot of these old records with the original artwork, they're awesome. I'd love to have them myself, but a lot of them are really hard to find, and you got to be ready to spend $80 to $100 on an LP. Whereas now they're re-releasing, vinyls and Blu-rays, with all new packaging artwork and just giving the collector something new with new features. And, I don't know. I just think it's really great. I think it's good that people can have access to their favorite things again, even if they're a little different from when they came out, in the 80s.
Definitely. And again, the new book, Ghoulish, The Art of Gary Pullin, is out now. And, Gary, it sounds like you're constantly working on stuff, but do you have maybe something in the works now, maybe upcoming projects we should look out for?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like I work for the KGB sometimes. I'm always sworn to secrecy on these projects. But, I've got lots of vinyl coming out. I've been working with Waxwork Records and Mondo and Maurice Saraband on lots of new releases. I've got, a couple of screen print posters coming down the pipe that I'm really excited about. And I'm going to be at San Diego Comic-Con this year with my, first time with a booth. So I'm really excited about that. I'm going to be exhibiting there all week long, and I'll also have copies of the book there too as well. So I'm really, really excited about doing all of that. And yeah, just really, really, really keeping busy. I wish I could spill the blood on some of the stuff I'm working on, but unfortunately, it's one of those things. I'll know when I'm allowed to. You'll know when I'm allowed to share it, because I'll be posting it as soon as I can on my social media.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm sure there's probably going to be plenty of it, whatever it is. You mentioned Waxworks. I love that stuff. I have the Chopping Mall and the Creep Show. I mean, a lot of those, the artwork, going back to the VHS covers, sometimes the artwork is better than the soundtracks to these films.
Yeah, I guess that does happen sometimes, but, I just try to treat every project that I'm on like it's like, as best I can. There have been posters where I've done the artwork for that maybe I'm not like such a huge fan of, but most of the stuff I do work on, I would say 99% of it, I'm passionate about, and I really try to I try to create artwork that I guess shows people that I'm a fan of this stuff as well, and I want people to respond to it and get excited about it, like they would the movie or the music. That's all I can try to do.
Excellent. Well, again, the book looks great. Ghoulish, The Art of Gary Pullin. Gary, again, I'm a huge fan of yours. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and I appreciate the call.
And again, that was artist Gary Pullin, and his new book, Ghoulish, The Art of Gary Pullin, is available now.